so let's start. Maybe for those who just joined, super quick introduction. We have Merve Bedir with us tonight or this morning. She's currently in Hong Kong, where she's teaching at the University of Hong Kong, right?
Exactly.
And also running her own design practice together with Jason, which is called SEC. Yes. So Merve is a scholar, teacher, practitioner, curator, you name it. She's doing everything. She's holding a PhD. She spent a long time. She's originally from Turkey. Spent a long time in the Netherlands, and then in Hong Kong, where she's at the moment. So I think we're very lucky and happy to have her with us.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a pleasure to be part of this, and I met Jean-Marie and Rebecca in Bangkok as when they were working at INDA in Chulalongkorn University, and we visited several times actually, and it's really good memories.
So Merve was doing a research for one of her research work, which then was exhibited in at the Istanbul Biennale, if I'm correct. She was tracing the new routes of the New Silk Road initiative, and somehow she ended up in Bangkok following some of our work, and it was great to discuss about about issues of in this case trading, and how that's reflected on some very small scale architecture, which is what we were working on at the moment. But this is just one of many examples, I think, of your approach to research, and I would start with if you want to share your screen, just if you're not familiar with Google Hangouts, it's on the bottom right. You have something called Present Now.
Right. It says it can't share my screen.
Well, I think then
I'll just share the window. What?
You cannot?
What's it saying?
It says I should grant permission, but it doesn't give me. It doesn't show me the option to grant permission.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It should be.
I've seen this problem before. I just don't know how to change it.
Is it because we are recording? But it doesn't make sense, no?
No, I don't think so. Let me see.
What browser are you using?
I'm using Firefox. But do you mind if I leave and come back?
Do you have another browser like Chrome or?
I do, but it should be. I think it's more because. Let me leave and come back, and then I'll just rejoin. So maybe that will solve it. It's the good old Control-Alt-Delete method, basically.
Okay.
Someone has to speak now.
You have to speak.
I
video too. You have to be here.
Well, I can tell you about my day. Oh,
too late.
Merve is back without microphone.
Well, muted.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. And you should also be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good.
There you go.
So, okay, so as I was saying before, As I was saying before, maybe actually I just start with a very, very quick introduction. So the material that I will show you today relate to the work that I've done by myself in collaboration with others, together with my partner at our office, Land and Civilization Compositions. And the first part is vocabulary of hospitality, as you see on the screen right now. That's something that I started while I was back in the Netherlands. And then the second part of the presentation, where I talk about Aformal Academy, it's more related to our work in Shenzhen, as it is presented elsewhere. And when I spoke with Gianmaria and Rebecca before, I was actually, because this is like the end of the whole process for you guys, and you have gone through a lot of, let's say, your own processes of research, doing and making and so on. I will focus much less on the content of the projects themselves, but I will rather share more in terms of what kind of outputs came out of what kind of processes, or how, let's say, we shared certain outputs, let's say. So I'll start with a couple of examples from vocabulary of hospitality. So this, again, like this project is something that I started while I was back in Rotterdam, and when I was working for the Netherlands Architecture Institute. I was leading some research projects, and I was also, let's say, curating the public program that works together with those research projects. That was, let's say, the sharing moments of those research projects. And it was interesting because we were actually looking more at large-scale infrastructure projects and their and the way they impact urban space and public space. And this vocabulary of hospitality came, let's say, as an extension of that research. One of the things that we found that we were interested in while we were looking at the, let's say, consequences or the impact of the large-scale infrastructure projects in the city was related to migrants, actually. And in this case, when I say in the city, I mean Istanbul in particular. And in Istanbul, migration is like it's almost like a natural phenomenon. It is an arrival city for many people. But then the phenomenon of migration kind of was very visible, especially around infrastructure projects, in large-scale urban infrastructures, let's say. And the idea of hospitality came out on two terms. One, in the sense that the city was, let's say, the ultimate host. The city was the host for everyone. And secondly, the idea of hospitality was something that came out, let's say, from the culture and from the law. And the law in Turkey talks about migration very much in terms of hospitality, as in the state being the host and the migrants being the guests of the state. But of course, when we think about this as a social phenomenon, it's not only the state who is the host, but it is also the citizens who are the host. But again, in a city like Istanbul, these concepts actually very much merge into each other. So at times you don't know who is the host and who is the guest anymore. And hospitality, as the etymology of the word, actually gives a lot of space to discuss these notions: host, guest, ghost, hostage. Like all of these words actually come from the same root, same origin of the word. And it's possible to see it in urban space. So the idea, basically, starting from the very beginning, like from the infrastructure and public space, it actually transitioned more towards and became actually a new project, new research project, looking at spaces of hospitality in the city. And here I will show you just two projects, which again, I think is interesting in terms of the purposes of this presentation. And these three projects actually, all of them have been part of an exhibition that I curated with the same name, Vocabulary of Hospitality, in Studio X Istanbul. For this exhibition, basically there were several collaborations which you see on the screen, but like GSAP, Arc-SNL, but also several others, actually Studio X Amman, Amman University, and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to forget the names, so I'm going to skip the list. So one of these was about actually one of the works as part of the exhibition was a work that was done by 4 artists, all of them living in Istanbul, but all of them being migrants. Metehan Özcan, who is a Turkish immigrant living from Istanbul but living in Istanbul. Ogi Lufuluabo, who is from Nigeria, if I remember it correctly now. It was in 2014, this project. And then Abnova and Basam Nabahan, who were from Damascus and who have recently moved to Istanbul. And the idea for their work in relation to Vocabulary of Hospitality was basically to collect names of the streets that are used in the way that the migrants give to them. So, for instance, what you see in the picture, Istiklal Street is maybe the most famous street in Istanbul. Istiklal Street is the name of the street is given during the Republic, actually. So only starting in 1920, the street was called Istiklal Street, and then actually the Nigerian migrants called the street Mil Mindere, which means 1,000 white faces. And this kind of showed a lot of, as part of, I mean, on the one hand, we like what we did with these collection of names. So it is not just for Istiklal Street, but for several streets they collected these names, and the idea was basically to print these names similar to the street plates, and to kind of show them in the exhibition space itself, but also to hang them in the public space too. So what we did was basically to hang up the plates, name plates, just under the street name, the official street name as well, which was very surprising for people, because I mean, like, nobody expects, let's say, to have their street name given in another way by someone else. And this kind of also, you know, reverses the gaze from or like, let's say, shifts the position of the subject, and shift the position of the viewer, and shifts the position of the spectacle as well. So suddenly let's say the white Turkish start to see that the street was named something completely different by, let's say, who are supposed to be quote unquote the guests of the city. So this is one example. Mindele example is like this is Galatasaray Square, which is also on the same street, but it is called Pole Square, based on the sculpture that we see in the middle of this space. It is informally called Galatasaray Square, but actually this space doesn't even have a name. But it is very much perceived as a square by the migrants who are hanging out here. And Pole Square is something that is used mostly by the migrants coming recently from Syria. And this was a name that was used by them, so it kind of was brought in from their, let's say, language. Another example that I want to show from the same exhibition. This was actually a work that was done by Ali Caninal, who is an architect from Turkey, from Istanbul, and myself. And I never thought that we might have trouble with the video, but it's a very simple video, so I hope it will work. And even if you miss a little bit, it should be fine. So what we did here, this is something that we started in 2013, and it was finished in 2014 when we put it up in the exhibition. And in this video, what you see is basically the interior of a detention center in Istanbul. what was interesting about doing this simulation model was I mean, there are several examples that and attitudes and let's say research positions that we see more and more. For instance, with an initiative like forensic architecture and so on, which actually looks at these kinds of spaces as spaces of let's say truth. In this case, we didn't necessarily aim for such, let's say, evidence collecting, but rather making visible the interior of a space that is normally not to be shared with public. So this space, this detention center, it's actually a second-degree monument building that used to belong to Armenians who are very small, in very small number, very small population in Istanbul by now. And the building was confiscated by the state, and it became a courthouse. It became, for a short term, it became a jail, and then it became a detention center for undocumented migrants. Let's say the last place that they see before they are deported from the country. So what we did was basically to have conversations, to do interviews with all kinds of people who have been inside, as the building has several thresholds, to kind of try to collect as much information as possible about the building itself and to make a simulation model of it from the inside, so we kind of make this visible to the outside. And what was interesting about this this work was that it was part of the exhibition, but then it also became part of school curriculum, both in architecture school and in the law school, and it kind of lived on as such. So the idea again here was to kind of inform rather than, let's say, providing evidence, even if actually like we put, of course, like all kinds of effort to cross-check the information and cross-check the conversations, interviews that we collected from people. So in that sense, like, we are confident about the correctness of the interior of the simulation model. But again, that wasn't necessarily the aim. The aim was to kind of inform the public about the inside of this space and to kind of make visible, let's say, what is normally seen just as a facade or a screen, or let's say a blank wall that you are not supposed to know on the inside. And what I think is also interesting for this work is that it is actually like the detention center itself is one of the spaces where the migrant becomes a ghost, like not to be seen, not to exist, let's say, as a body. But in this, focusing on the space itself and making the space visible in a way, also kind of hopefully that was the aim, to move the position of the migrant from that of the ghost to that of a visible subject in the city. So I'm going to skip. During the conversation, we can come back if you want to. And then the other one. Another one that I want to show here, again, it's okay if the videos are jumping, and actually I can share the videos again if you would like to look more later. I can share them with Jean-Marie and Denny and Rebecca, so you can have a look more if you're interested in further. So this is the third work that I'm showing from the exhibition. There were 5-6 works totaling in the exhibition, and this one is about the stadium and the African Football League in Istanbul. And the idea here was to basically focus on, again, the stadium itself as a space, and how the stadium itself becomes a space of hospitality. In this case, African migrants. There are from the larger African continent, from 14 different countries, there are migrants living in Istanbul. Most of them are documented, and most of them working basically in labor works in Istanbul. And one of the things that was done, I mean, there's this neighborhood that is literally called Little Africa, and I'm sure actually this exists it is a kind of phenomenon in different places in the world. And what happens was that that the municipality of this neighborhood provides this small-scale stadium to the migrants from all of these countries, and they set up their own football league. And the trainings and the games themselves, they start to provide the space for everyone to come there and to watch the games. So in this case, for instance, the migrants from, let's say, the two countries that are watching the games sit on the regular seats in the stadium, and then the locals, let's say the citizens, the hosts, they sit on another side of the stadium. They don't necessarily come together, but they still watch the same game. So this is just one example, but there's basically an entire there was an entire discussion around how the let's say the complexity of the stadium becoming a space of hospitality, from the football managers who come to watch the games and recruit players to the Turkish National Football League, to the families from the neighborhood coming in and watching the games, to the friendships that are being set up in the games, to the fact that once let's say the player gets recruited to the National Football League, that starts a procedure to become legal, because the manager then has to obtain residence permit, work permit, and so on. So then suddenly let's say there's a possibility for the guests to become the host, or let's say how the locals become the guests of the African migrants within the space of the stadium. So the idea was really to kind of find different ways and present it within the actuality of the city. Like these are very much the let's say potentials that come from living in this complex city, and where the positions of being the host and the guest very much mixes with each other, and creates a kind of space of, again, like the complex of hospitality. So this was a 2-channel video installation by Artikuşlar Collective, another collective that's from Istanbul. And there's another channel of this actually, which shows only the audience or the supporters of the game. But again, for the sake of simplicity, I just picked this one, and I'm happy to share these videos later. From here, actually, I'm just going to jump straight to, actually, maybe there is one more work that I can share. This was related to vocabulary of hospitality. The idea was this was a project that was curated by Michiel van Eersel, failed architecture from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. And they curated this exhibition called Misericordia. And they invited us to kind of be, let's say, the exhibitors or the artists or the participants of this exhibition. And we were kind of free to choose the way we intervene. And my contribution, so first of all, I invited another group called Be Another Lab from New York. And they actually work a lot with United Nations, and they use different technologies, let's say, to kind of shift personalities or shift experiences of a part of the subject, let's say. Again, these works are all related to or are all related to agency and the subjectivity. And again, these relationships of and infrastructure of being of hospitality, let's say, within the city. So what I did was basically I collected objects that relate to personal memories that or personal experiences that relate to hospitality, and then I might be another lab to use this one to use this specific technology to shift the perspective of the viewer, let's say, again, to shift the agency or to shift the subjectivity. So what they do is, I mean, this was in 2015 or 16. I'm very sorry, there's construction going on upstairs at 10:30 p.m. Anyway, so this was, so Be Another Lab works with this technology to kind of, once you wear these goggles, you start to see your own body from the goggles themselves. So it is as if you are looking at yourself once you wear the goggles. So the idea here was basically to, once the curtain was closed, you would wear the goggles and you would basically see yourself. And once the curtain is open, you actually start to see the other person. And when the curtain was closed, basically using these objects, you will tell the other person, who is you, your own story. And once the curtain opens, then you start to see the other person. So by kind of playing with kind of position and the view and the let's say vision, spectacle, and so on, the idea was to kind of again, like, play with this or complicate this idea of self and other, and to try to kind of, let's say, maybe not empathize, maybe it's too little of an effort to try to empathize with someone, but at least to try to put yourself in someone else's position. Okay, so from here I can jump to Aformal Academy. The story of Aformal Academy is a little bit, I mean, the reason that I went to Shenzhen was actually based on my work in the Netherlands. Some of the things that I've done in the Netherlands was invited to Shenzhen Biennale, and that's the reason I went there in the first place. But then later on, we were again invited to we were invited to Shenzhen Biennale several times, and one of the times that we were invited, we actually proposed to do a school program rather than doing an exhibition, and this was accepted. So during the 2015-16 edition of Shenzhen Biennale, we proposed this school program called Aformal Academy. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of the program too much, but the idea was to basically explore or experiment on ways of learning the city. And some of the ways that we tried to do this was basically organizing walks. This was maybe this was between 2015 and 16, which kind of continued later on, using parks, using alleys, using metro stops to do gatherings, presentations, conversations, meeting with people, and so on. We invited several people who were part of the Biennale to join the workshops. So in this case, for instance, with Liam Young, there was a filming workshop. With Mimi Zeiger, there was a writing criticism workshop. And actually, like this, so the WeChat magazine was something that we did during one of these workshops. So the idea was to use the WeChat platform itself to kind of communicate and to create a full, let's say, text that is visual, textual, emoji-based, and so on, sticker-based, and everything that WeChat provides, basically, and to kind of create the text or the medium of criticism through the WeChat platform or the software or the application itself. Another one was to create these huge collage drawings, basically using existing sections of the city. So basically, this was an exercise by students or by the participants of the workshop, and in the end, this was one of the sections that came out. There was another one about transactional objects with Crit from Bombay, so looking at the objects that kind of takes us in space and time, or create different interactions among citizens or among different people. Another one was about tracing surplus with Superuse, who is a design office from the Netherlands. creating assemblages, so based on observations and based on, let's say, making new objects, creating new spaces around in the, let's say, unexpected spaces in the city. So in this case, for instance, it was a tea room slash sauna that would be also, that was also mobile. And it was really a working intervention, so it was tested in different places. I don't know if it has been half an hour already, but I can give maybe.
Yeah, I think we can look at maybe one more project.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this one is about looking at the Taobao villages in China and really like focusing on. So this is. I'm afraid I need to explain what the Taobao village is, but it is basically where they, Taobao network. Taobao is like Etsy. It's basically a digital platform for shopping, but there are specific villages all around China who produce, let's say, objects, things, materials, furniture, and so on, to be sold on Taobao. And this was one of the villages that we visited and we studied and we lived, actually, we revisited several times. And it was a collaboration, again, with several partners, Tongji University Soil, which is a technology company, and Shaji village itself. Here, what you see is a river. This river, they are building a harbor, a small-scale port by the river, which I will come back to later, but it was super interesting. And this was the first thing that we saw once we were approaching the village. And this was an investment by the village itself to build a port by the river that leads to Shaji village. And this was the second thing that we saw, which was a photo shoot, photo studio, where they basically shoot each and every furniture that's produced within Shaji village. So it was very interesting to kind of, because what we always heard about Taobao villages was like, these are villages that are, let's say, still rural, but also urbanized in a way, because there was very rapid upward economical development within these villages themselves. People, like small-scale farmers, were becoming, let's say, like rich in a very short time. Some of them were continuing to do agriculture and still producing furniture as well. But some of them were basically stopping doing agriculture and just only producing furniture. So what we see was a transition from agricultural space to factories and changing typologies of housing and so on. But the interesting thing was for us to kind of see this when we first arrived, the port, and then second was the photo shoot, the studio, let's say. And the third is this. So basically what you see in the middle is the old house, the traditional house, and the fields, because some of the farmers continue. And then here, then you see the production space on the right-hand side and the old farmhouse on the left-hand side. Another view from the village, another view from the village. And what we did was basically to present this as an installation in the form of a bunk bed in Saõ Paulo Biennale. What we tried to do was to kind of bring together all of these aspects of research in the form of this installation, which is a bunk bed that's produced exactly in the same shape in the Taobao village, in Shaji Taobao village. So here you see different, let's say, photos of the space, or like, videos from different parts of the village. What you see.
How do they sleep on the upper bed? They look so uncomfortable.
This one. What?
The upper area. No.
Yeah.
Now I see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we put the mattress only in the bottom. We didn't put the mattress on top. Basically, we left it open. But this is basically a child-sized bunk bed that was produced in the village. But here you see the research itself, like how, I mean, the villages here, literally under the cursor, and then the port through the river, and then to Qingdao, to Dalian port, and then all the way to through Trans-Siberian Railway and even from Finland. So the route shows, this route shows where the material, the wood material comes to Shaji, and then the other smaller lines that maybe you don't see very well here are like what are the other supply materials, let's say, to build the furniture. So the wood comes all the way from, let's say, Finland and parts of Russia, and then all the other materials come from elsewhere in China, and they are all produced made into furniture in Shaji village, and then they are, let's say, sold back to elsewhere in the world. Well, mostly China and mostly Asia, but expanding more and more, let's say. So yeah, then you also see the typologies that we worked, how the village has transformed, the, let's say, smaller scale drawings, the digital network that the village is dependent on, and so on. This is another project, but maybe I'll stop here and I can always come back to it. It's another research project that we did as Aformal Academy in collaboration with the New Institute in Rotterdam. It looks at the, let's say, automation of the labor in Pearl River Delta. Shall I stop or shall I continue? I can't keep going.
we don't want to keep you up until midnight. Maybe we can see if there's any questions at this point. I have a few remarks, but I'll wait to see if anyone else wants to start.
Yeah, again, I have to say, like, I mean, I didn't want to get too much into the content and really just wanted to share the output. So maybe, yeah, I mean, we can discuss representation, but also forms of, let's say, sharing. But also, if you'd like me to explain more about the content, I'm happy to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I can start. No, I mean, I think it's great to have an overview of all different outcomes and also different media that were used during the research. And I think what is sort of the common thread, what brings everything together, is this idea of a narrative, of how you find evidence, but then how you tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, so that's what I really enjoyed. And you know, it can be done through 3D models, objects, photographs, video documentary, interviews, drawings. Like really, it's really interesting. This idea that what matters is the story, and then maybe depending on the particular story, depending on the pieces of evidence that you collect, you can find the most appropriate medium to express it. And that's kind of my reading of what you showed us, but you can, of course, disagree. No, I find this interesting in regard to what we have done, because we went exactly the opposite way. So all of our weekly workshops were centered on sorry, just wanted to switch my camera. All of our workshops were centered on tools and methods, but then the content was left completely open to the interpretation of participants. And for us, it was also an experiment to try to work with such a big and diverse group of individuals who were in different parts of the world, and you know, with completely different backgrounds and different things to do. But what brought us together there was the same method, the same procedure. So we were more looking, I would say, at differences or comparisons rather than looking for a cohesive narrative. So that's, I don't know, that's like, for me, it's an interesting parallel, which would also could maybe lead to possible ways of explaining this to others, which is what we have to do now.
Well, I mean, the reason vocabulary of hospitality was actually the vocabulary. So the ways that we researched migration, and actually when I say we really, like, I had my own research, there were several people doing different research, which were all part of the exhibition. And that's the reason that it was called vocabulary, because it was really like a catalog of different terms, and the way those different terms are, that we see them in the city. So I think this kind of vocabulary dictionary, lexicon, I think this is a kind of, I think this is like one way of thinking about these things, thinking about the form of sharing, let's say. There, the term, the way we explore the term, and then the way we exhibit the term, the media, the tool, the methodology, the participants, the agency, that kind of all together comes, that all comes together in the vocabulary, or in the dictionary, or in the lexicon, or in the catalog. So I think that's one way to think about it. And we see, actually, I mean, that comes very much from, I'm also thinking more and more about this recently, like well, it could also be my own sensitivity that I see more and more projects about vocabularies, dictionaries, and so on. But I think it also relates a little bit to our emerging needs to redefine things, redefine the things that we see around ourselves. The crisis.
I think that point about sort of needing to redefine things is quite interesting when we think about what we're doing this week, because we're learning about how to edit Wikipedia in the current workshop, and I think that's quite interesting to reflect on in what you were just saying now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I always really enjoy hearing all the work that you've been up to. It's just, it really touches, it's quite poetic. And there's always this question of not just what you're researching and how to represent that research, but then where to display the represented research, and how often it's framed around a biennale or an exhibition, but how you sort of exert your agency over making that sort of final decision about, you know, reinstalling the research back into the place, or sourcing the materials from the place that you're researching to then get shipped all across, you know, the world. So I think it's quite inspiring understanding that whole process that you go through.
This is also something, I mean, yeah, thanks a lot, Becca. I mean, I feel embarrassed too when I hear positive things, but like, I mean, there's one thing for sure, for instance, like the vocabulary of hospitality, for instance. The idea was, we knew that there was going to be an exhibition at some point, but the way we worked on things with all of the people who are the collaborators, the participants of the exhibition, we also didn't necessarily, in the end, push them into that one space. So that's why, for instance, like those plates ended up on the street. Or yeah, like the video itself becomes part of the curriculum. So it also, in the end, kind of yeah, how do you say? It flows out of the space. It kind of goes beyond the beyond the exhibition space. Yeah. So that's interesting, the relationship, like how they kind of influence each other.
There's also this question about who the research is really for.
Exactly.
And how, I mean, I think the frame of an exhibition is often quite distanced. And maybe a question to ask is what value do you see in that form? Like what do you think exhibitions can bring about? Because they often are presented to audiences that are quite sort of separated from the reality or separated from whatever you are researching.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely one thing. This is something I was discussing with someone else the other day. Somehow none of my works as exhibition, let's say, they ended up in waste. They're literally like there's no there's no waste of the exhibition. It just always ended up in other forms. It moved to other places, like the bunk bed, for instance, like it was given to a family in Saõ Paulo, so it didn't come back, you know. We just left it there and we just gave it to a family, including the pillows, the sheets and everything. Like, yeah, I mean, there's so in that sense, the output is always to become something else. But maybe this is also why, like, the exhibition or the work to be shared is never to just look at or and I don't mean, I'm not trying to, like, how do I say? Yeah, I'm not trying to devalue the, like, I mean, of course, exhibitions are for spectacle. You look at them, they're beautiful, you sell the work, you make money, it's all good. Like, I'm not devaluing any of it. But somehow the way that I have done exhibitions or I have done exhibitions in collaboration, they were always like either to make something more visible or to put something more forward, to make others' works more share and, you know, like, yeah. So this is interesting, and I find a lot of value in this because especially sharing knowledge and experience, I think, is very important.
Yeah, the afterlife of an exhibition is not often thought about. Yeah.
What I'm also really fascinated about is this idea that of becoming something else, and maybe of not knowing the final result in the moment when you start, but figuring it out on the way, and also kind of the flexibility of adapting the output maybe to new venues, because that's, I mean, as Rebecca pointed out, like the work you showed us adds some context in which it was shown, and I think it's important also to recognize that we're not building up exhibition by ourselves. That we have to insert them into a certain framework, is whatever the curator or the context or the event calls for. And I'm thinking about this specifically looking at the fellows who are connected, because funny enough, they also represent 4 projects which are real projects. They're working on a Space Luna, and I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. I think that what you showed us could be very inspirational for also starting to think outside of what is the brief of the project, and how what we produce for that project could be recycled, but maybe not recycled, more like upcycled in some other context. So like the 4 projects we're working on are actually sort of a performative exhibition in Los Angeles, a small building in Thailand, and 2 design build festivals in California. But I think what is the core of those projects are the topics and the research on context and information that we gather from the experts we talk to. And all of that knowledge doesn't necessarily need to be narrowed down to the expected outcome. It also take other, it could branch out. And that's, I think, something to always keep in mind.
Is there anything that's that can be shared that we can look together, or do you think it's
maybe regarding the satellite lab? Also, another thing I can share my screen quickly. Another thing that I was that I had in the back, on the tip of my tongue, was when you were talking about the vocabulary lexicon, and I think it's quite interesting that most of the outputs at this point took the form of some sort of a list or catalog. So you see my screen? Yeah. I'm just
yeah. No, I like a lot the Wikipedia hackathon. I like this a lot because it's also like so many things. I always have trouble explaining certain things in English. For instance, I look for other words, other terms. Sometimes I just say it in whatever Turkish, Dutch, like whatever language that I learned that word, and then I try to explain it in English, the meaning of it. And I think Wikipedia, like providing and creating those inputs in Wikipedia is actually super interesting for let's say, again, like complicating, but also making the dictionary more contemporary and more, let's say, cross-contextual and so on. So I like this idea a lot.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, like looking back at the first workshops, it has been a little bit of a journey across different levels of knowledge. But in the first one, which was researching it was also gathering of information, but it was very much centered on the individual experience of one of our fellows. So we had this tool, which was the live broadcasting, and then everyone was bringing in pieces of information into one screen and then presenting to everybody. But then this, I think, already evolved into another scale when we went to the second workshop, which was more about objects and the environment, so that we started to create this, again, catalog of 3D scans of urban objects that are, in this case, are completely out of context, but they're collected together in this virtual space and sort of collide in terms of aesthetics and function, and also the reason why people actually decided to scan those objects instead of others. These were already collected together in a virtual gaming engine, sort of mismatch.
I'm now checking if I'm following you on Instagram.
Very bad.
Yeah, I wasn't. I'm following.
But then the next step.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
It's just I'm making this up right now. But I'm literally brainstorming with all you guys. The next step was not only comparing different experiences, but it was about sharing those. So we had this huge Excel sheets of catalogs, which were thematically arranged by each participant, but they were especially meant to grow by sharing. So someone was more into sort of neighborhood scale and available food. Someone was more into activities or into objects that were underused in households that could be shared across the city and things like that. Then we had the fourth workshop, which is not published yet on Instagram, was this idea of creating a cookbook of 360 environments where there was also a component of sharing. So someone was choosing a recipe, someone was choosing in the form of a sound, and then he passed it over to the next participant that had to interpret that, translate. And then again, this sort of reinterpretation could be experienced by everyone in an immersive way. And then we end up with Wikipedia Hackathon, which is, I think, again on a higher level, because it's about concepts. So it's about creating knowledge, creating some sort of intellectual content, which is not referred to another participant, which is not referred to all the participants, but it's really for the outer world. So,
I like this. Yeah, no, I mean, the more I think about it, well, first of all, how like Instagram, WhatsApp, WeChat, like how these, let's say this space becomes, and especially with the COVID and everything, how they now become, let's say, very significant tools on their own. Like you can actually use them as the medium. It's not just about showing it anymore. You literally use it to create the content and to share the content and to kind of make it available. But then also, like for instance, when I think about vocabulary of hospitality, like it is still something autonomous in itself. Like you have to visit it, but once you put it up on Wikipedia, you're actually inserting it into the existing infrastructure. So you're kind of both, you're transforming, you're changing what is there already, and you're also creating more space of encounter between the work and to the people who are going to share it potentially. So it's
And one thing we're also questioning now is sort of the life after the lab, because we're in our last week, and we had originally imagined that we would be formatting things into this sort of like DIY manual, into an open source sort of toolkit for other people to access, but we've ended up, well, sort of where appropriate, making online tutorials that are already accessible. And it almost feels like the life after the lab is something that happens without necessarily knowing where or how. It's something that then the participants have agency over. I mean, in 5 years' time, somebody might realize that they've used 3D imagery and that they actually learned that tool in some strange online program during lockdown. And it's in some ways it would be potentially interesting to sort of keep track of that, or to understand how these sort of quite practical skills, but at the same time skills that we don't have an application for yet. We're sort of learning things, but we don't yet know how those things will be integrated into our practice or into our lives. And I think that answer will emerge with time. And yeah, it's just interesting to think how that, you know, that this idea of the life after something.
Yeah.
What lives
No,
on.
Well, this is something that I have. I mean, I would have never thought, for instance, the way that Telegram and there's a forum application, LIHKG, that's used during the protests in Hong Kong. The way these two applications were used during the protests actually created this kind of coalescence of space. That's what I call. I mean, you know, there is the discussion, let's say, the digital space, the merging of the digital space with the physical space. Like, for me, that was always a discussion. That was always a discursive thing for me until the protests. And when the protests happened, that really became a reality, because you are in the space, you are on the street, but you're also using Telegram almost as you use your legs or your hands to communicate with others and to kind of act within this network that is not necessarily organized within the physical space, but it is organized completely in the digital space, but it also informs the physical space and vice versa. So this is something that, like, I would have never imagined that would happen last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but suddenly it comes. It is incidental, it is improvisational, it is performative, and so on. So, I mean, in that sense, like what you're saying, the afterlife, it doesn't have to be something that we aim for or that we kind of make purpose, let's say, but it just happens. You don't know when that moment will come, but it happens. And if it doesn't happen, then it also kind of how do you say, like it gets obsolete and it kind of disappears, and that's also fine.
Yeah. Sorry for all the participants, but you guys are always shy, so we always talk anyways. But if there are any questions or comments from anybody who is in the chat at the moment, you're also welcome to use the chat function as always. If there's something that you feel you want to ask about, if there's any project you want more information on, maybe, all those are options for you.
I just want to call up Nick, because when I saw the what was it called, Misericordia project, and then the part with the Oculus Rift, I immediately thought about the cadet and climate anxiety hotline.
In what way?
In options of triggering or in options of I would say specializing or objectifying emotions.
Yeah. And actually,
John, that jumped out at me as well, but I guess I need a little time to think about how it would connect back to where cadet is at the moment. But I thought about that a little bit too. There was some sort of resonance there. Sorry, I don't have more to add.
Well, what I can tell you for sure is that that's kind of, it was really mind blowing. Like, I mean, one thing, so me and, oh my God, I forgot about my friend's name. Well, my friend who is from Vienna the Lab, so we were doing the first exercise together, and then basically what we did was we just gave the goggles to other people to try, and the idea was literally to share your painful experience with the other person. But as you are talking about your painful experience, you're actually looking at yourself. So it's really crazy. The experience itself is really crazy. And actually, like, people started talking about their hi Nick. So people started talking about their terrible boss, or like the experience in passport control. So it really became about sharing the infrastructure of pain in a way.
I mean, I'm so fascinated at the moment. Oh, London sirens. I'm just so fascinated with the mind-body connection at the moment. And how there's various techniques for sort of working through things that are unresolved, and that your body is sort of physically reacting to, but you're not really conscious of. And one of the suggestions is just through journaling, which is essentially a conversation with yourself. You are just writing and expressing things that are there, but almost need an outlet. And you don't need to necessarily have that other person to listen. You just have to expel it. You just have to express it. And I find it so fascinating how there's this need to release. And I think with the project that we're working on now, maybe there is this question of we're imagining that there is a listener. We imagine that there's a mediator or somebody who's sort of mitigating the conversation. And perhaps that could be experimented a little bit more. Maybe it's it's not necessarily the need for that to be validated by somebody else. But,
Definitely. Yeah, no.
About, just to give you a context, this project is about psychological distress caused by climate change.
Okay.
And we're starting with a trial version, which is in the format of a phone hotline. So you can call up and then express your fears and your distress. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like, for me, there are two things. Like, one is what Rebecca said. It sometimes, well, like talking to the mirror or talking to yourself, or like expressing yourself in a way that it doesn't need to be listened by someone else. Like the kind of expression. And the second thing is about translation again, like the way we translate it. And how, yeah, I mean, with Google, for instance, it somehow facilitates that translation. Well, making entries into Wikipedia is also a form of translation. Or the objects that are used in the same, as part of the same exhibition, that's also a form of translation. And this, the climate change and the psychological distress, yeah, it's fascinating. I would love to see the result. Yeah.
yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's for now. It's a series of experiments and prototypes and lots of unanswered questions and sort of ethical considerations as well. But yeah, it's just the beginning. Anyways, I think last chance from the very, very quiet crowd.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. And it was so great to see all those different outputs over a bunch of different mediums and with different tools. And yeah, it was really interesting to see that flexibility. So thank you, very inspiring.
And well, thanks a lot. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it because I was a bit like jumping all over the place. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And thank you for inviting Jan, Rebecca, Denny. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Of course. Thank you, man. We hope to see you soon in the flesh.
I hope so. I'm going crazy. I need the distress. I'm holding a diary. Yeah.
We're gonna send you the number. Please call.
I would love to see I would love to see the works for sure. Anyway, and also like yeah, it's nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you too.
Ciao. Good night. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Have a good day and the rest of the workshop. Take care.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Bye. Bye. Bye.